Welcome to Great Loop Radio, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. This is Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today my guest is... Welcome to Great Loop Radio, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. This is Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today my guest is Steve Arnt, who is the general manager of Columbus Marina. Steve is a longtime AGLCA supporter and long-term Looper supporter, and he's going to talk with us a little bit today about what to expect when you pull into a marina during this COVID era that is going to be remaining with us for a little while longer. Before we bring Steve in, I do want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with that completed, I'd like to welcome Steve Arnt with Columbus Marina to Great Loop Radio. Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kim. It's good seeing you again, and I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, and I think you can bring some great insight because you were at Columbus Marina throughout 2020 as all of this was happening. And I think, you know, probably the immediate thing when things started closing down is a lot of marinas, some particularly municipal marinas, did close down, some stayed open. You know, early 2020, almost a year ago now, what was it like when all of this first started to break with coronavirus and there was so much uncertainty?
Well, luckily for us, it kind of hit during our slow season. So February, March, April, the weather's still pretty chilly here. So we weren't too terribly busy. Most of the loopers that had come through typically come through here in the fall, so they'd already passed through. But still, it was a pretty confusing time because a lot of boats were still, you know, traveling on the rivers. And we were hearing words that, you know, some marinas were closed, some marinas were open, especially down in Florida, because that's where most of the transients were. That, you know, people just didn't know if they were going to have a space when they got there. Here, especially, you know, we're a fairly rural area in Mississippi. So there were a lot of people that were, you know, not really convinced it was a thing, and it was just something that was happening on the coast, and it, you know, probably wouldn't happen here. But at some point in March was when it started really hitting home, and the case count started climbing. Our local government here in Columbus wound up doing a stay-at-home order in late March, and they closed down all non-essential businesses. And you know, even though boaters love to think of a marina as an essential business, especially in a smaller area like this, it really isn't. So what we wound up doing was modifying our hours to where we were closed, but I had the phone rolled over to my cell phone so I could still take calls even though we weren't here. So on the few transients that were passing through, we were still able to come in and help them and get them through and get them on down the road. For our local boat owners that were here, it was pretty much call us and schedule an appointment, and we'll come in and help you as we can. But it was interesting, to say the least, in the beginning when nobody really knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in that question of essential services. And for those who don't know, actually, let's back up just a little bit. You did mention Columbus, Mississippi, but tell us, for those who don't know, where you are on the waterway, on the loop.
Well, we're on North Mississippi. We're on the 10-ton waterway. We're at mile marker 335, so we're a little over 300 miles north of the Gulf Coast. So pretty much anybody doing the loop, or anybody that's you know, running a transient vessel from Canada to the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, they'll pass through unless they're taking the risk of going down the Mississippi River.
Right.
But yeah, so we see quite a few people, not just loopers, but we see a lot of transients, you know, boat owners that, you know, some are up north and then winter down in Florida. Again, we didn't see as many this spring because a lot of the owners were like, let's just sit tight. Let's see what happens. So.
Right. And I think that was the case in a lot of places. And essential service wise, as you said, you know, Florida was kind of a different story. A lot of things were shut down, lots of confusion. It did seem as the confusion and the uncertainty started to subside a little bit, some of the coastal states did start to classify marinas as essential services, in part due to lobbying efforts from boaters who kind of pointed out that those who live aboard a marina is an essential service. That's where they need to be able to tie up to get food. That's where they need to be able to take on fuel. That's where they need to be able to get a pump out. So how long did it take, Steve, for your area to allow you to reopen? And, any insight you might have on other areas on what the status of marinas is. I'm not hearing of too many that are still closed, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the order that closed on non-essential businesses here lasted for about a month. So just before the 1st of May was whenever they started opening up again. And, I did have one lady that was disappointed because they were pulling up to the fuel dock in a pontoon boat and we weren't here. And she called me and she said, well, I need to get gas. And I said, well, we're not open. She said, well, you're an essential business. I need gas. And I said, ma'am, riding around on a lake in a pontoon boat is not considered essential, But, a transient passing through, me personally, I didn't, speak with the city leaders, but I knew that they would say that that would be essential because these are people that are traveling to go through from point A to point B and we're trying to get back home or trying to get somewhere. And I can certainly understand why areas like Florida and along the coast, that some of the marinas were considered essential businesses because you did have more transit businesses going through. You did have more liveaboards. You did have people that really did need their services. So I can definitely understand why they did that. Right now, I don't know of very many areas that really have marinas that are closed. To the best of my knowledge, they're all open. There may still be some that are open with caveats, like kind of a contactless service where you'll come in, give us a credit card over the phone. We'll, you pay for it that way. We'll help you tie up the boat, but we don't actually interact with customers. We're not that way. We take precautions, but we're still here. But to my knowledge, I don't know of any marinas that are actually fully closed still.
Yeah, and so many marinas on the coast also serve commercial traffic, law enforcement vessels for fuel and things like that. So, like I said, the uncertainty early on, I think, created some of the chaos. That seems to have subsided. But Steve, you did kind of mention precautions. So let's jump into that a little bit. I know, like, for example, on the Trent Severn, although U.S. citizens could not get to the Trent Severn this year, it was open for Canadian citizens. And one of the things that they did differently, and they're kind of known for their being very boater friendly and providing excellent service. But one of the things that they had to do differently was that they would not handle your lines and help you tie up in the canal to maintain that distance and to not be touching surfaces that the boaters were also touching. So anything like that was put in place at your marina or others that you're aware of, line handling, here in South Carolina, the gyms reopened, but like the shower facilities are closed. So what are some of the restrictions that you're still seeing out there or specifically there in Columbus?
Well, in the beginning, we were just very cautious as far as touching any services that anybody else might, wearing masks, trying to limit any sort of interaction, making sure we're social distancing, staying at least 6 feet away from everybody. But then as the science came out and they realized it was more and more airborne and less transferred by touch, although it still could be, we sort of relaxed some of those. So we still help boats tie up. We try not to get too close to the boat owners, but honestly, when you're tying up a boat, usually the boat owner stays on the boat. They toss us the line, we tie them up. Helping them plug in their lines, or plug in their power, all that good stuff. What we do really to kind of social distance is in our store more than anything else. The Columbus area does have a mask mandate in place, so we do require everybody to have a mask that comes in the store. That's easy. If somebody shows up by car, they hop out of the car, they put on their mask. At this point, for everybody, it's second nature. But a lot of people, especially if you're a looper heading down the river, you're on your boat, you've got a mask. It's not that hard to grab it and put it on. But for other boaters that maybe have launched nearby and put a boat in the water in the trailer, they leave the mask in the car and then they hop on the boat and they come to the marina and they come up and it's like, oh no, I don't have a mask. So in those cases, what I would just do is I would just limit it to just one person per boat and then we would just stay away from them. But as far as here at the marina, wiping down all of our surfaces, especially the things that get touched most, the counter, the credit card machine, that sort of thing, making sure we're keeping the bathrooms clean and just trying to limit any sort of transmission services we may have.
Mm-hmm. How about any other, and I'm not 100% sure what you have there at Columbus, but any other, amenities that you know of that are remaining closed in marinas? For those that have bathhouses, swimming pools, all the different captain's lounges, any impacts that loopers should know about at facilities like that?
So here we don't have swimming pool, but what we do have that a lot of places don't is courtesy cars. We've actually got 2 of them, and that's the biggest thing because especially in this part of the world on the 10 Tom, some areas to stop and go have dinner and restock can be pretty far apart. So, with us, it's having the ability to have our boat owners hop in the car and go into town. In the beginning, there were a lot of restaurants that were closed and a lot of places they couldn't get into. You could still go to Walmart or a grocery store or something like that. But it was really, for us, it was setting an expectation when the boat owner called and said, hey, I want to make a reservation. Just on, okay, hey, this is what we've got. You can go into town. You'll need to wear a mask, but you might not find everything open that you're looking for. As far as some of my other friends in the business that have marinas with swimming pools and things like that, for the most part, they've kept them all open, but with restrictions. They're posting signs, wear a mask, stay 6 feet away. You get a lot of people that think, oh, I'm outside, I don't have to worry about this stuff, but you kind of still do. So I would just warn anybody that's heading downriver or upriver, up coast or wherever, call ahead to your next spot you're going to. Make sure they know you're coming, and then ask them what they've got closed. Because if you think you're going to go there and hang out for a week and eat at their local restaurant and swim at the swimming pool and it's closed when you get there, you'll be unhappy. So.
Right. And honestly, that's the best advice that you can give, because obviously Steve can tell us exactly what's happening there in Columbus. But the Loop is a pretty large geographic area. Every place is different. Every place keeps changing. So honestly, the best thing to do is to call ahead, and that's going to manage your own expectations as well. And I'm really glad you brought up the courtesy car, Steve, because it sounds like yours are still in use, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We've got 2 of them. Yeah.
Okay. And that's great, because they're on the 10 Tom, as you said, it's very much needed. I have heard of some marinas that are not allowing the courtesy cars to be used right now because of COVID, because it's too hard to make sure that those are cleaned properly between customers. So if you are using a courtesy car, just an extra caution to be safe and careful with that. But also, if you are planning to take a courtesy car at a marina that generally has one and may not have the same, same government regulations as Steve's got there in Columbus, the courtesy cars are not always available. So if you're planning to provision and think you're going to be able to use that, definitely check that out when you call ahead.
Well, even if you are going to use the courtesy car, take some handy wipes with you. Wipe the steering wheel down, wipe down the gear shifter and anything door handles, because you don't know who was in there before you. It's funny. I see a lot of folks that are, especially back in the fall when we had most of our loopers come through here, and they talk about, oh, we've been social distancing, we're wearing masks. And then the first thing they do when they tie up is they start running down the docks and hugging everybody they haven't seen for a while. It's like, that's not social distancing.
It's
so
not.
You really want to hug them. But the best thing to do is just kind of do the elbow bump or a fist bump, and just be safe, because you definitely want them to be there the next time.
Yeah. And Steve, you've been at some of our events, and you've probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of loopers come through over the years. I mean, it is a social group, and I get asked regularly, can you still do the loop with COVID out there? Not if you have COVID, with COVID out there. Absolutely, but it may be a little bit of a different experience. So if the social aspect is something you were really looking for, that might be a little bit more challenging. So it sounds like, and most of the social aspects, depending on where you are, but it's largely outside. But so you're saying it still happens, Steve, but obviously, recommending that people still keep that social distance, but social gatherings on the docks still happening out there?
Yeah, I mean, dock tails is always going to happen, but you can social distance in dock tail. You can break your chairs out and put them on the dock and sit several feet away and still talk and, still have drinks and still have a good time. I think the hardest part is when you've pulled up and, I'm a looper. I'm in my boat. I'm in the marina, and I see a friend of mine. I hear him on the radio, and they're coming down the river. And it's like, oh, I haven't seen Tom and Debbie in a month. Oh, I can't wait till they get here. And they hop off the boat, and everybody's excited, and you go hug them. And that's great, And 99.9% of the time, nothing bad's going to happen. But you never know, that one person. And I won't tell any tales, but I do know of at least one instance on the rivers here where somebody came through, and they did happen to have the coronavirus. And they weren't aware of it, because, generally it takes, 3 to 5 days before symptoms show up. And they went through, and then what we heard behind them was there were several other people that wound up getting it as well. So it's pretty contagious. You really don't want to let your guard down. As much as you want to see Tom and Debbie again, wave to them, don't hug them.
Yeah, well, and we don't know how many of our members as a whole have contracted the coronavirus. Obviously, with the numbers where they are, it's likely many, especially we worry because our age demographic is a little bit towards the older side. And we have had some members that very, very sadly have passed from coronavirus. Some gold loopers, some that hadn't had the opportunity to start yet. So, not to be a downer or to frighten anybody, but it is out there. And even though the loop is this special like bubble that we kind of feel like we're in this magical thing, and it is, but it's still, it is part of our culture and part of our group specifically now. So we just want everybody to remain safe. And on that note, these restrictions are in place to protect the boaters, but also to protect the marina staff. So let's take a quick break and play a message from a sponsor. But when I jump back in, I kind of want to talk about that and how you and your folks are remaining safe, Steve. So we'll be back in a moment.
Good morning, loopers. Many of you are probably already cruising in southeastern waters, and that is where the Salty Southeast Cruisers Net focuses all of its efforts to help you enjoy your time on the water. So as you prepare for the next leg of your journey, and as your resource for accurate, timely, and useful information, we want to invite you to use and add your knowledge to the wealth of information that's available through the Cruisers Net in its directories for marinas, bridges, and anchorages, as well as the latest fuel prices in your area. Our mission of Cruisers Helping Cruisers, may we invite you to help those following in your wake by sharing with us your cruising experiences. Thank you. Have a great day.
We're back on Great Loop Radio. My guest today is Steve Arnt. He is the general manager at Columbus Marina, which is on the Tenn-Tom in Columbus, Mississippi. He is a long-term AGLCA sponsor, and we've seen him at lots of our events where he is always the life of the party. Bingo games is what you're still remembered for, Steve.
Yep.
And we're, of course, talking about what loopers can expect along the waterways and in the marinas in this era of coronavirus that's going to be with us, it seems, for a little while longer. So, Steve, obviously the guidelines that we're seeing all over the place are designed to keep everyone safe, not just the boaters, but also yourself and your staff. So how have you been able to remain safe, and how much has actual people getting sick impacted you and your staff?
Well, so for the most part, we have been able to remain safe. The same guidelines that are in place for the boat owners are in place for us as well. It's always kind of frustrating for me here locally. I'll go into a local business and there's a sign on the door that says, everybody has to wear a mask, and I go inside and the people in there aren't wearing masks. And it's also funny to me that a lot of people don't realize that, wearing a mask protects more other people. I'm wearing a mask to protect you, not so much for me. It does help me, but it more helps you. So in the beginning, we did definitely wear masks, kept everything clean. And sadly, there's only one employee at my marina that has actually gotten sick, and you're looking at him. I wound up picking it up in late July, and I was out for a couple of weeks, and wasn't fun. Definitely wasn't fun. I wasn't knocking on death's door, but I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But my initial concern was, oh my goodness, I hope I haven't gotten anybody else at the marina sick. And then a couple of days later, after I realized nobody else had gotten sick, I was like, oh my goodness, what would I have done had somebody gotten sick? Number one, I would have felt horrible for getting somebody sick. But, a small marina like ours, we've only got during the summer 4 or 5 employees. And then this time of year, we've got 2 full-time and 1 part-time. So if we lose, say when I got sick, there went 25% of my staff. So if one other one had gotten sick, then we went down to half staff, and it would have definitely impacted how we dealt with our guests. But, the big thing is with us, we're not only trying to keep our boat owners safe, but I'm really more concerned about my own employees, because they're what make the marina great. It's a wonderful spot. It's a wonderful location. I'm just a pretty face. They do all the work, and they're far more important than I am.
Well, we're very glad to see that you have fully recovered, Steve. But are there any things that you as general manager there would want loopers and other transient boaters to know about coming through? What should they do to help themselves stay safe, but also to keep you and your staff safe? And you're right, with particularly with a small staff, the consequences beyond the health issues can be very devastating for a small business. So, anything that is just second nature to do when you arrive and hop off your boat that maybe people should refrain from a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Well, we've actually already covered almost all of them.
Okay, good.
It's extremely important. Resist the urge to hug the people you haven't seen for a long time. Call ahead to make sure that Marina A is open, B has the amenities you're looking for, and C, more importantly, knows you're coming. For instance, we did have, I mentioned early last year, in March and April, whenever we were closed as a non-essential business, I do know that we did have a couple of boats, a couple of boats that came through that did stay with us that didn't call in advance, because a lot of boats, they'll call on the radio when they get closed. These folks didn't have a reservation, they didn't call on the phone. I do know they called on the radio and they pulled up, and there was nobody here. Odds are that's not going to happen to anybody going forward right now. But the big thing you can do is just make sure you call that marina in advance and make sure that they know you're coming. And then the other thing is be patient with the staff that is there, because especially doing the loop, you're on the trip of a lifetime and it's great. But for most of the folks who work in the marinas, it's a job. It's what they do day in, day out. And they may be married with kids, and they're struggling with who's going to watch the kids today, because they're doing distance learning and having to teach at home. So they may be under quite a bit more stress than they seem, because, pulling in the marina, it's pretty easy what we do. We're just here to make you guys happy. And 99% of the time, that's easy. But it can be difficult to do if you've got a lot of stress at home. So just be patient, and above all, have a good time, and take it easy.
Yeah, and that's great advice. I'm sure you saw in your area, like most places, boating really kind of exploded during the summer because it was one of the few recreational things that you could do, and you're outside and it's fairly safe compared to some other activities. So from what you've seen there on the Tenn-Tom, how has boating changed with coronavirus?
Well, as you mentioned, it exploded during the summer. We really didn't see it coming, and most of the folks that I speak with in the industry were really taken by surprise as well. We knew that we'd probably be a little bit busy, because boating is an excellent way to social distance. So we knew that we'd have at least our existing boat owners, go out and enjoy it. What we didn't expect was all the new boat owners and all the people that bought pontoon boats and runabouts and small cruisers, and just they went crazy. This summer was very busy. That being said, our transient business, which is, the folks that are heading up and down the river, it dropped off dramatically. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it had to do with, the folks that kept their boats down in Florida during the winter. When all this was kicking off, they didn't want to take the risk of running it upriver. And then once summer got there, they were like, hey, there's no hurricanes. We'll be okay. Let's just leave it down there. So we didn't see as much transient traffic this year. We obviously had a very reduced looper season. But I think that was less to do with COVID and more to the locks that were closed on Illinois. I would say we probably got about 60%. We saw about a 60% drop of our normal transient traffic. I would say for our loopers, we probably saw about a drop of about 75%.
Yeah.
But those that were here were still having a great time. They were, for the vast majority of them, they were social distancing. They were taking precautions. They were wearing masks, and they were happy that we were doing the same.
Yeah. But, and I think you and I talked before coronavirus, because the concern was those lock closures on the Illinois waterway and how many loopers would be coming through and how late in the season it would be. And, who would have thought that would not be the biggest obstacle? And, besides coronavirus and the lock closures, because of the virus, folks couldn't go to Canada. The New York canals opened so late. So I'm not surprised that you saw about a 75% drop off. It was probably only, a handful of boats that continued once those locks reopened, which was into November. And I think a lot of the people you saw before that were folks who were starting from south of the closure to begin with, their home ports, and they were just starting out on the loop. So definitely strange and interesting times. And we'll see what 2021 brings, Steve, as far as the transient traffic. I know yours is not all loopers, because there are people who come from the Great Lakes every year through the Tenn-Tom to get to the Gulf to spend winter in Florida. With the Canadian border still the big remaining piece of uncertainty for loopers for 2021, it'll be an interesting season to see how many actually do end up coming through. A lot of folks who are still planning to do the loop in 2021 are preparing to take the canals that help them to avoid Canada. And while they would love to go to Canada, and that's a highlight for many people, right now they just can't. So I know lots of loopers on both sides of the border that are really eager for that to open back up, and hopefully it'll happen early enough in the season that things can get a little bit more back to normal in terms of a looping schedule, so to speak, a looping time frame. Let's call it that. We don't like schedules very much. So Steve, anything else that I haven't asked you, or that you want loopers to know about being at a marina during COVID, or just in general about Columbus?
No, not necessarily. I'm a silver lining kind of guy. So to me, the silver lining in this is that we had the lock closures and COVID in the same year. If it had happened back to back, there would have been a lot of people that would have had to, postpone their dreams. There were, like you said, there were a lot of people that, kind of planned ahead because of the lock closures. We knew in advance they were coming. If we had known in advance COVID was coming, people would have done their loop sooner as well. But I think people that are doing a loop, they're going to loop. You're not going to stop them from doing a loop. You had mentioned earlier, something along the lines of that there are some people that do the loop and docktails, the social aspect is the big thing. But there's other people that just want to do the loop because they like birds and they like, nature, and they like to be out and anchor up. So if you're the kind of person that's doing the loop and, the hanging out on the dock is not a big part of it, cast off and go. You'll be social distancing naturally, and that's great. And then, just take your precautions when you go into town or to resupply or something like that. If you're the kind of folks that are doing the loop because you like the social aspect of it, you can still do it. You just kind of got to be a little more careful. If it turns out that 2021 is the year that you have to do the loop, just plan ahead. You should be able to do it. I don't see any reason why not. If you have to go through Canada, then we kind of got to wait for Canada. But, depending on what kind of boat you've got, if you can do it, I say cast off and do it. Follow your dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of you have questions about how to do the loop without going to Canada, even if your air draft is more than the Erie Canal can handle, you can get to Lake Ontario through the Oswego and then continue through the Welland Canal back to Lake Erie. Definitely some challenges there. The Welland Canal is in Canada. You need to hire a captain, thereby making it a commercial transit while the border is closed only, but we've been getting lots of questions about this. But you can go through the Welland Canal. Well, your boat can. You need to hire a captain so it becomes a commercial vessel. Contact me if you have questions about that. But Steve is absolutely right, and that was great advice. It can still be done. It can still be the trip of a lifetime. We still had 104, I think is the final count, that finished it in 2020. So, and that was down about, 50 or so boats, maybe 60 boats from the year before. So absolutely can still be done. And while you're on your way through the Tenn-Tom, definitely stop and see Steve and his crew there at Columbus Marina. Steve, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your long-term AGLCA sponsorship.
Thank you for having me. We really enjoy it, and we love seeing loopers. Stop by and say hey.
Yeah, stay well. And to our watchers and listeners, thank you for joining us once again on Great Loop Radio. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, safe cruising.